Thousands of supporters of Bolsonaro took to the streets of Brazil on Tuesday for Independence Day protests. As he stepped up his attacks on Brazil's Supreme Court. During an address, Brazil's embattled right-wing president doubled down on his attacks on the country's electronic voting system by calling the entire electoral process a farce.
Nós queremos eleições limpas, auditáveis e com contagem pública do governo. Não posso participar de uma farsa como essa patrocinada ainda pelo presidente do Tribunal Superior Eleitoral.
Bolsonaro also went on to accuse the Supreme Court and the Congress of blocking his reform policies and favouring his opponents. He currently trails in the polls of Brazil's October 2022 elections, in which he is expected to face leftist former President Lula da Silva. Tensions between Bolsonaro and Brazil's Supreme Court have flared up after court resisted Bolsonaro's attempt to reintroduce paper voting receipts as a backup to the electronic voting system. Supporters of Bolsonaro gathered outside Congress in the Brazilian capital on Tuesday to back the far-right leader in his dispute with the country's top court. Security forces used tear gas outside the foreign ministry to disperse the crowd. A public square outside the Supreme Court remained closed off by barriers and police personnel to prevent further disruptions. Hundreds of supporters also flagged to Rio's iconic Copacabana beach to show their support for the country's right-wing president. Supporters dressed in green and yellow of the Brazilian flag marched near the beach in a show of support for his attacks on the country's Supreme Court. Now, in many cities, anti-Bolsonaro protesters geared up for rival rallies to denounce the Brazilian leader. Dozens of protesters banged pots in Rio de Janeiro and Brasilia to reject the government of President Bolsonaro. Moving on now, after a break in talks following elections in June, Iran has again begun enriching its uranium stock. Iran maintains that its nuclear program is peaceful and that it has informed the UNSC watchdog about its activities. Now, analysts say that President Ibrahim Raisi is playing hardball, tactically seeking negotiations that would lift the US sanctions on Iran. France and Germany have been urging Iran to return to negotiations as well. According to a report from UN's nuclear watchdog, Iran has boosted its stocks of uranium enriched above the percentage allowed in the 2015 deal with world powers. Under the deal, Iran was not meant to enrich uranium above 3.67%, well below the 90% threshold needed for a nuclear weapon. However, the report estimates that Iran has now 84.3 kilos of uranium enriched to 20%, and as well as 10 kilos enriched to up to 60%. Meanwhile, the UN atomic watchdog has criticized Iran for delaying a probe into past activities and harming important monitoring work. The International Atomic Agency noted no progress on two central issues explaining uranium traces found at several old undeclared sites and getting urgent access to some monitoring equipment, so that the agency can continue to keep track of parts of Iran's nuclear program. The IAEA urgently needs access to equipment to swap out memory cards so there are no gaps in observation. The investigation into uranium traces has been going on for more than a year now, and the IAEA says that Iran could produce and hide unknown quantities of this equipment that can be used to then make weapons or reactor fuel if so-called community of knowledge is disrupted. Now, the United States and its European allies must decide whether to push for a resolution at next week's meeting of the 35-nation Board of Governors pressuring Iran to yield. A resolution could also make resuming talks on the deal harder, since Tehran usually bristles at such moves. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.